Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Okie dokie, so today I am painting Spring Mountain Meadow and I'm going to be sipping on a little Cabernet. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for the materials today I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores or you can get it online. And of course you can switch up the size if you want to, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. The colors I'm using are titanium white, cobalt blue, burnt umber, which I will refer to as brown, green oxide, Mars black, deep yellow, fluorescent pink, and fluorescent purple. And again, you can switch up those colors, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using 3 brushes today. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch wide bristle brush. I'm going to use a number 12 round brush and a number 0 round brush. And you'll probably hear me refer to these as small, medium, and large throughout the process. I will also be using a number 2 pencil because we have to do an initial sketch, just a regular generic pencil. You're going to need, let's see, a cup of water for washing your brushes. You'll also need a paper towel for drying your brushes. And I'm going to put in the description below step-by-step text instructions so you can certainly print those and use them. And I'm also going to put a downloadable image of the final painting so you can download that and print it and use it as a visual reference as you go through this painting process. And that's all we're going to need. All right, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to sketch our landscape. I'm going to be using my pencil. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through where I'm going to be making my lines, and you can just kind of follow along. You can alter them if you want to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by making a horizontal line. I'm going to come down about 1/3 of the way down my canvas. I'm going to make myself a mark, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And if you feel like you want to have it exactly at the same height, you can use your pencil or something along that line as your measuring tool. You measure how far down you came here, you go to the other side, you kind of hold your finger there, make yourself a mark, and then you're just going to make yourself a line going across. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come about halfway between here and here, make myself a little mark. I'm going to come about maybe 2 or 3 inches over here from the right hand side, make myself a little mark, and now I'm going to connect these 2 dots with a kind of a diagonal kind of scooping line, something like that. And again, doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line. Actually, if it bends a little bit, that makes it more natural. Now I'm going to make myself some hills. So I'm going to come about halfway between here and here. That's where I'm going to mark my first hill. And this hill is going to come, if this is your halfway point, I'm going to bring it maybe a little bit past that halfway point. So this is going to be my first hill. And then my second hill, I'm going to make it shorter than this one. So I went up like this, and I did this about halfway. So I'm going to kind of go halfway and then drop it a little bit on the right-hand side, make myself a mark. And I want this to come up this hill a little bit. So I'm going to make another mark here, and then I'm going to make myself a little hill. That's going to be my hill number 2. And then I'm going to make one here. So I'm going to make a mark about here and maybe, I don't know, about here. And then I'm going to kind of go up just a little bit, make one there. And then my 4th hill is going to be, I'll make a mark here and about here. And then that's going to be my 4th hill. And that's all I'm going to do for my sketch. The next brush that we're going to use is our large brush. So you can put down your pencil, get out your large bristle brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm painting my sky. I'm going to be using my bristle brush, and I'm going to be using blue and white. I want my sky to be darker at the top and lighter as it goes towards those mountains. So I'm going to start with both blue and white on my brush. I'm going to be using almost a long left to right, like crisscross kind of motion. And for me, I will not pick up blue again. This is going to be the only time I pick up blue, and I'm also not going to wash my brush. So what I'll be doing is I'm just going to be picking up white after this, and what's going to happen is my sky will naturally get lighter and lighter as it goes down towards those hills. And I'm not using a lot of paint because I don't have a very big area that I'm painting. So by using a small amount of paint, what happens is I'm able to kind of keep it moving, get it to blend nicely as it's drying. But if you use a ton of paint, you might have difficulty getting to that lighter shade. So if that happens, what you can do, just wash and dry your brush and maybe start over in the color realm, so that way you can get it to go lighter as it comes down. But if it's not getting lighter, just again wash and dry your brush, and you want to come all the way down to that pencil line. You even want to hit it. It's okay if you hit the pencil line. What you don't want to do is leave vacant canvas between the sky and those mountains. So just make sure that you get that sky all the way down, and then when you're done, I just kind of lightly brush my brush over the sky, make sure I have everything nice and blended in. And then we are going to use the same brush for the next step. So when you get done doing this sky that looks like it's got some wispy clouds going by, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting these two back hills. I'm using my large bristle brush. Sometimes that's a little bit of a tongue twister for me, so I have to say it slow, especially when I'm sipping. I'm going to be using 5 colors. I'm using brown, blue, green, yellow, and white. And my goal here is to have these two hills darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. And I want them to have a little bit of blue in them, because if you were to look off into a real mountain landscape, the farther away the hills get, the less saturated the colors are, and the more you end up seeing a little bit of blue, or purple for that matter. So we're going to use the blue as this tonal change, giving it a little atmospheric dimension. So I'm going to start with brown, blue, and green, just a little bit of all 3 of those colors on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to be using a dotting technique. So I'm going to kind of just dot along the bottom edge of each one of these hills. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. You don't want to bring this too close to this edge, because you want to be able to see the difference from this hill to this hill. So I'm going to have the edge of this one a little bit lighter. So once I've got that start with the brown, green, and blue, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch my brush into the same combination, but I'm also going to add yellow and white. So a little bit of green, brown, blue, just a tiny, tiny dab, and a touch of yellow and a touch of white. And what's going to happen now is as I go up this hill, you're going to see that it's going to get a little bit lighter. So, and I am kind of dabbing it back into that original section. And then the next time I go to pick up paint, I'm just going to be picking up white and yellow. And that's going to add the brightness to the top. And again, I'm not using a lot of paint, and I'm not really over dabbing it. I just really am trying to get a nice soft look to it, and to make it look like there's a little bit of sunshine at the top. And I'm going to do this for both hills. You want to make sure that you get the, you cover the pencil mark. So as you're doing this, I'm just adding, I just added a little bit more green to my brush just to make sure you can see the difference between these two hills. Just a touch more yellow and white is going on my brush right now to get the top of this one. And again, just make sure that you cover those, the pencil marks. And if you feel like it's not set off in the distance enough for you, you can certainly add a tiny bit more of the blue. That's going to certainly throw it a little bit further back than the hills that we're going to be doing in a minute. So again, if you feel like it's not off in the distance enough, just add a touch more blue to your brush, and you don't need a lot, just a teeny tiny bit will suffice. And just make sure that from one hill to the next you can see the difference. And we are going to use the same brush for the next step, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it in between. So wash and dry that large bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be coloring in our front hills. So I'm going to use my large bristle brush. The colors I'm going to be using are black, brown, green, yellow, and white. And I'm going to do this with the same thought process that I want them dark at the bottom and light at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with black and brown on my brush. I am going to be painting these with a dotting technique, but when I do this first area at the bottom where it's going to meet my water or where it's going to meet this other area, I'm using a left to right brush stroke. So right now I have brown and black on my brush, and I'm starting with this. I'm almost just like lightly dusting or skirting the paint in this left to right motion at the bottom of these hills. And you can kind of probably hear it almost sounds dry because I'm not using a lot of paint on my brush. And it's okay if you come into your water area a little bit. That's going to actually enhance the water when we do it later. Now that I've got that bottom section, I'm not going to pick up black again. I'm just going to pick up brown and green. And this is where I'm going to start to dot my hills going up. And I do have a little bit of black still on my brush. So you want to make sure that it's getting a nice transition into that black line that you did. You don't want it to be a really solid black line. So if it's not dotting a nice transition, maybe you need to pick up a touch more black, but I think that mine is working out just fine. And then again, I want this area at the top of this hill is going to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to kind of stay away from that area. And I'm hopping over to my next hill here. I still just have green and brown on my brush right now, and whatever remnants of black are still on there as well. And you can see I'm not doing a really straight line going across because I don't want this to look like a, rows of color. I really want it to be a gradual transition. So now I'm going to pick up just green, and now I'm going to start to dot that brown and green section into just my green section. And you can see I'm kind of dotting up and down. And this way it gives it a nice transition going up that hill. And this is meant to kind of look like light, fluffy, treetops off in the distance. It doesn't necessarily have to look like a smooth hill with just grass on it, which I guess it could. But in my head, this front is kind of intended to be tree, like a forest full of treetops on there. I just picked up yellow and green on my brush, so this is where it's going to start to get a little bit lighter as I go towards the tops of these hills. And again, I'm dotting back down into the previous section, so that's going to help me to get some light spots and some dark spots. And you could take this yellow and dot a little bit down below. Totally up to you on the visual side if you want yours to look like it's got some brighter spots down below. And again, I'm going to repeat the same kind of step over here. I've got yellow and green on my brush right now. I'm going to kind of make sure it's pretty dark and through there. And now I'm going to go for some yellow and white on my brush. And I have not washed my brush throughout this process because I want these colors to kind of transition off of my brush onto the canvas and to have a nice even transition, like they belong together. And I'm dotting nice and light up at the top, just like maybe the sun is kind of showing its pretty, you know, texture and light at the top of these hills. It's a, you know, maybe a nice summer day off in the wilderness somewhere. And this one, I'm gonna do the same thing. I've got yellow and white on my brush, and I'm doing a very uneven top to this hill. These front ones, you can have them more uneven than those back ones because they're closer to us. So you would see some of this detail a little bit more in focus than you would in the back hills. So if you want these front hills to look like they've got a little bit more detail, then you want to have kind of more contrast in your colors, and you want to have more of an uneven kind of top to them, because that's going to give the illusion that you have little trees popping their heads out, you know, every now and again. You can even put little pointy spots, and you know, you can really have some fun. If you want there to look like there's some low trees in through here, you just pop in a couple of light sections, and that's going to give the illusion that there's some shorter trees in through there. So just have fun with it. We are going to use this same brush, the large brush, for the next step. So once you've got this front hill all nice and textured and having some great contrast in the colors and maybe some pop-up little pine trees here and there, you can certainly wash and dry it and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our water. I'm using my large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm using are brown, green, blue, and white. And my thought process is I'm going to have it darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, and I'm going to be using the brown and green more at the top and the blue in the middle, and then more of the white at the bottom. So this way it's almost going to give the illusion of a reflection from these front mountains. So I'm going to start with brown and green on my brush, and I'm going to be using a left to right kind of skirting motion. And it's okay if you go up into that black a little bit, because that's just going to lead the viewer into understanding that that's the bottom of the hill, and this is almost like a reflection of that hill. I suppose you could add a little bit of yellow and white, but for simplicity purposes, I'm just going to start with the green and brown. If you wanted to later, you could certainly come back and put, you know, a little bit of that yellow on there, but I'm just going to use green and brown. And now that I've got that area kind of in there, I'm going to pick up some blue and white, and I'm going to start adding the water into here. So again, I'm just going left to right. I'm not using a lot of paint on my brush, and I did not wash it. And I didn't wash it because I do like to have a little bit of green in my water, and sometimes some brown too, especially when I'm doing like lake water or pond water, because to me, there's so many elements underneath that water. Granted, the water is meant to reflect stuff in the sky, but it also takes on colors that are underneath that water too. So in lakes and ponds, you're going to have, you know, algae and rocks and all kinds of stuff underneath that water that's going to provide varying shades and hues of color. So that's why I definitely like to have some really natural tones in the water. And as I come down towards the bottom, I'm really just at this point picking up white. And what's happening is my water is getting lighter and lighter as it's coming down towards that land. And then I am going to use this brush for the same brush for the next step. I just added a touch more blue onto my brush because I want it a little bit darker over there. I am going to use the same brush for the next step, but I'm going to wash it and dry it in between. If I can get myself to stop painting this water here, we'd be all set. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so wash and dry the bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're gonna paint our base layer for the grass. And I'm going to be using green, yellow, brown, and white. And I'm going to start by using green and yellow on my brush at the same time. And this is going to be the dominant color combination that I'm going to use. And I'm just dotting the entire ground. So that first time I picked up a good amount of paint. The next, and it was both green and yellow. Now I'm just picking up yellow. And I like to kind of dot in a chaotic fashion. I just picked up green. And now I'm going to just alternate green and yellow until I get the entire ground covered. And only then will I introduce brown and white. And the reason why I'm going to reserve that until after I get the entire ground covered is because if you try to do this dotting technique with brown and white and the yellow and green all at the same time, you'll end up with a big muddy mess. So this way, this is going to control the color palette of it and allow you to make fewer mistakes, I guess would be the right word, even though there isn't really any mistakes in painting. But this way, this definitely helps the vibrancy of it. If you start to use the brown and the white too early, again, what may end up happening is you may end up with almost like a muddy look to it. So right now I'm just kind of dotting pretty fast. I'm using a good amount of paint on my brush. You don't have to get every tiny little speckle because you are going to be adding some additional colors in a minute here. But definitely you want to make sure that you get the majority of it covered. And you can see that because I'm kind of alternating whether or not I pick up yellow or green, what's happening is I'm getting some light spots and some darker spots. And acrylic paint will dry a little bit darker than it is when it's wet. So just know that that's going to come into the equation as well. But I'm definitely making sure that I have this grass all nice and covered in with the yellow and green before I start using the brown and the white. And I'm just intending this grass to look like it's got some sunshine on it. It's kind of wild grass. It's not cut super short. It's got, you know, a little bit of overgrowth to it. I'm considering it a meadow off in the woods somewhere that somebody is not mowing every day. So that's why I've got it messy. And even along the edges, it's pretty messy. But now that I've got that, I've got the green and the yellow. Now I'm going to introduce a little bit of brown. So I just picked up brown, yellow, and green. And I'm just going to kind of dot it in some various spots. And you want it not to look polka dotty, so I'm just going to kind of work it in a little bit. I've got mine a little bit darker over on the right hand side as if this is going down deep into a meadow. I'm going to kind of dot this up here. And then when I've got a little bit of brown on there, now I'm going to pick up some yellow and white, and I'm going to add some sunshine kind of highlights over on this side. So this is yellow and white on my brush, and you can see I'm kind of giving it an uneven top over here. And again, I reserved using the white until last, so that way I don't over blend it, and I just make sure I've got some real nice vibrancies in here. And then once you get done with this step, we are going to switch brushes to your small brush. So get this as nice and vibrant as you want it, and then you can put this large brush, wow, away in your water cup and take out your small brush, the tiny little round one, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step, we're using our small round brush. We are doing the tree trunks in our little grove of trees that we're gonna have down in the meadow. So the colors that I'm gonna be using are black, brown, and white. And I'm gonna be using these colors at the same time on my brush. So every time I go to pick up paint, I'm starting with all three colors, but I might pick up black one time, I might pick up brown the next time, I might pick up white the next time. My goal here is to have different colored trunks. I want them to be sticking up into the water, and I want them to be all throughout this area. Maybe, you know, maybe you do like a triangle section of them. I'm going to do this really fast, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle my brush up and down like this. So every time I go to pick up paint, I'm picking up those three colors, and I'm really just kind of moving my brush in an up and down fashion. And you have to make sure that you have a lot of paint on your brush. So if you feel your brush is getting dry or you're not getting the results that you're looking for, you really want to just add more paint to that brush. And I'm just continuing to make these vertical kind of lines. They could be crooked if you wanted them to be crooked, but we're going to be putting a ton of treetops on here, so it's not going to really make too much of a difference if you have them going diagonal or anything like that. And I'm not even concerned about any branches or anything like that. This is just meant to look like it's really far off in the distance. And then once you have a good assortment, you can see I've got a little section here, and it kind of gets into a bigger, wider section off in the distance. Once you feel like you have this section accomplished, we're going to switch brushes to the medium brush. So you get your tree chunks done, put your small brush in your water cup, take out the medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are making flower stems / close-up grass. And I'm going to be using my medium brush, my number 12 round brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are green, brown, white, and yellow. So those are the same exact colors that you have on your grass right now. And in order to make these pieces stand out, you have to have contrast. So instead of all the time picking up all four colors on your brush at the same time, sometimes you're going to want to just pick up white. Sometimes you're just going to want to pick up brown. The white and the brown standing alone are going to show the contrast of the stems or the pieces of grass, and you'll be able to see them better. So here I go. I'm going to start with green, brown, white, and yellow on my brush at the same time. I know that I want some big, tall stems over here, so that's kind of where I'm going to start, because that's the star of the show, so to speak. So as I do these, I'm going to use a very loose touch. I don't hold my brush tight and make these straight like pencil marks. I want to have some movement in my stems. So now I just picked up a little bit of brown. I definitely want some stems and stuff going in through here. And then this grass is meant to be, you know, bigger and thicker as it gets towards us, which is the viewer. So as I go down towards the bottom of my canvas, I can press harder with my brush, and that's going to give me thicker and wider pieces of grass. And then when I go over to that right-hand side, I am going to make them smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'll still use a good amount of paint on my brush, but I'm not going to press as hard, because I want it to look like it's getting smaller and smaller as it goes down here, because that's in essence going downhill. So I'm still kind of just adding some in through here, and then as I go down towards this right-hand side, I'm going to use less pressure, and I'm going to make them smaller. So you definitely want to use all four colors, but just kind of keep rotating them as you go to pick them up on your brush. And that way you'll get a good assortment of light spots and dark spots. And I'm going a little bit slower over on this right-hand side so I can kind of ensure that I'm making my stems or my pieces of grass a little bit smaller. I think I'm going to add one or two more big ones over here, because I really like, I like it to look kind of overgrown and wild and like somebody has not been, you know, attending to this wild flowers over here, which means that they're wild. So once you get this step done, which I always have fun doing this long, fun grass / stems, we are going to switch brushes to your large bristle brush. So get enough stems and close-up grass over here, and then you will put this brush away in your water cup and take out your large bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are going to paint the treetops in our grove of trees. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm using are purple, pink, green, and white. And I'm going to use those 4 colors because I want this to look like they are blossoming spring trees. And a lot of blossoming spring trees to me have those pale white and pink and purple flowers, and then with a little hint of green because there's leaves that are growing there too. So I'm going to be using the corner of my brush. I'm going to be using a dotting technique, and I want to have different size treetops and different shades of this color. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of maybe white and pink on my brush, and I'm going to just pick a couple of spots. That's going to be a pink and white tree. Maybe I have a little tiny one here. You want to keep some of these, some of the tree trunks showing, but you want to have different size treetops, and you want to have a little bit of space in between. So right now I just picked up a little bit of purple and white, and I didn't wash my brush. If you paint with me often, you're going to notice I'm a very lazy paint brush washer. But to me, it adds to the, you know, to the authenticity of it being a natural kind of landscape, because nature doesn't wash its paintbrush either. And it always has lots of colors that intermingle. Right now I'm picking up white and green, and I'm going to intermingle some little green splotches with whatever remnants of the other colors are on my brush. And you can see as I'm doing this, I'm really getting a nice assortment of different shades of treetops. I want this to look kind of on the messier side. I want it to look like there's, you know, various trees that are just kind of awakening in the springtime. I'm making a couple little smaller ones down there. And you can really just have fun with this. I guess if you wanted to incorporate yellow, you could do that too. But I think you want to be careful of this not getting lost within your grass. So that's kind of why I'm staying away from yellow. I know I've got some green in here, but I think if I start introducing yellow, I could potentially run into a little bit of trouble. So once you get this done, which I'm digging how mine's looking, we are going to switch brushes to the medium brush. So you can put this big brush away in your water cup and take out your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so I'm going to call this the funnest step of the painting. It is creating your wildflowers throughout the ground. I'm going to be using my medium brush. You might, after you see the different types of flowers I'm going to do, you might choose to use your bristle brush for some of them or your small brush for others. But I will probably just use this brush for all of them. I want to show you first, before we get into it, how to custom make different colors if you want to. You have obviously some nice vibrant colors on your palette, which you could certainly use, but I'm a huge fan of a nice peach color. So what I like to do is I like to take this vibrant pink and I put some of my yellow in it and then a touch of white, and I get this really pretty peachy color, and I totally dig this color in this painting. But you can make whatever colors you want. You could certainly take the purple and you could add a touch of yellow to that, and it makes this really cool, like almost like a rusty purple. It's a really neat color. So you could play with these colors and customize them. But what I suggest you do while making these flowers is you always incorporate white into the flower. And the reason I suggest that is because with acrylic paint, what's going to happen is there'll be, a lot of times these colors are see-through or translucent. So if you put a nice pink flower down here and you just use your vibrant pink, it'll be see-through. So you'll want to use it with pink and white on your brush at the same time, or you pre-mix a color. I like using my designated color with white on my brush at the same time, and that way I get an assortment of colors within the flower. So I'm going to show you a couple of different shapes of flowers. And what I do is I make imaginary flowers, and it's just the easiest way for me to do a wild flower kind of painting. My first one that I'm going to make is kind of like a teardrop type shape. I'll use my peach color that I just made, and it already has white in it. So this is my favorite flower to do in these wild paintings. So I'm going to make it something like that. And you want to make sure your paint is nice and thick. And if you want, you can certainly, you know, dab your brush in white and just add a little highlight to it if you want to. What I suggest doing whenever you make a shape is, and a color, is you make several of that going down into the rest of the painting. So if I wanted like another one in through here, and then I could just continue with that same shape throughout the painting, and they would get smaller and smaller as they go down to the right. But I'll go down to the right in a minute. I really want to just kind of show you a couple of different types of flowers, and then you can have fun watching me go down towards the smaller end of the canvas. The next kind of flower I'm going to make is what I refer to as my pinwheel flower. So I'm going to take blue and white on my brush at the same time, pinwheel or lollipop or whatever you want. So I've got blue and white. It looks like there's a little bit of black on my brush too, which I'm going to just pick off. Okay, so blue and white, and really what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making a pinwheel. So I'm going to do blue and white again, and you can have different sizes, but because I have these colors on my brush at the same time and it's not a pre-mixed color, it really helps to give the illusion, oops, I had a little pink on it that time, the illusion of multiple colors and highlighted areas within the flower. So again, I would make several of these and make them go smaller and smaller as they go down towards the right of the canvas. The next flower is kind of like, oh, where's my paper towel? There it is. Kind of like a daisy. You can use just white paint on your brush to start. And what I do is I'm going to make several kind of leaves coming from a central location. They've got a little bit of a curve. And then I just pick a color. It could be brown, it could be peach, it could be whatever you want, and make a little dot in the middle. And you could make a whole bunch of these. And they don't just have to be at the end of a piece of grass. You can certainly put them in the middle of the grass. So don't feel like every flower you make has to be at the end of a piece of grass. It can certainly be within the middle of it. And then I would make smaller ones as I go down. And then the next kind of flower I'm going to show you is kind of like, I don't know, like I want to call it wheatgrass, or I am definitely not a flower expert, but it's kind of a flower that has little fluffy colors on the end of it. So I'm going to be using yellow and white on my brush at the same time, and I'm going to kind of polka dot this up in like a curving kind of fashion. And again, you could, you know, maybe have a small one here, maybe another one here, and you can just have fun. It's really just polka dots. And it's going, you know, kind of in a long fashion. And then the last kind I'm going to show you is just polka dots. So, but it's multiple colors on my brush. So I don't have any particular name to this flower or just fancy descriptive words. I'm just going to put purple and white, if I can find a clean spot of white. And I'm really just going to kind of polka dot, you know, maybe just dot it a couple of times. But because I have both colors on my brush at the same time, you can see I'm getting this really cool illusion to it, where it almost looks like I have a light, you know, spot at the top of it, and then I could just kind of dot, you know, smaller dots down below. So those are the types of flowers I'm going to do. I'm just washing and drying my brush, and I'm going to, right now, I'm going to go from this left-hand side, and I'm going to kind of start over with this teardrop type flower, and I'm going to use this color, and I'm going to go ahead and make some smaller ones, maybe a couple small ones here. And I'm really just going to kind of go over to the right of this canvas. As I get to these smaller ones, I'm just making tiny marks in the type of shape that that larger one is. And then I'm going to, as I get down the hill, I'm really just making these tiny polka dots with that same color. So it looks like these flowers have dotted themselves all through the floor of the meadow down below. So that's that one. I'm going to switch to blue and white right now, make myself a couple more of these pinwheel type flowers, and I'm going to just kind of make them smaller as I get towards this right hand side. And again, they're meant to be in a similar shape. So I'm still kind of making this little circle, and then as I get towards this right, they're going to start to just become polka dots, little tiny polka dots going down this hill, just kind of ever so cutely dotting the floor of that meadow. Now I'm going to go and do some more daisies, and then some of those yellow flowers. And again, have fun with this. This is one of those things you may, as you're going through this, say, ooh, I think I want to make this other kind of flower that she didn't talk about. Maybe you're going to make little tulips throughout your canvas, or you're going to pick up some red and make a whole bunch of wild roses. That'd be super cool. So, you know, use your own flower knowledge, which I am very limited in that field, and make a whole bunch of fun, you know, exotic, maybe you know how to interpret a bird of paradise, and you can make yours a big tropical flower jungle. It really is up to your knowledge of flowers and what you feel is going to make your painting custom to what you interpret as a wild mountain flower kind of landscape. And then I'm just kind of dotting these little tiny white spots down here so I can represent these daisies as they're going down the hill. I'm just kind of putting a couple of little dots in the middle of them, and then I'm going to go into my yellow and white flowers, and I'm almost done here. I've got a good assortment of, you know, the types of flowers that I really like to see on this painting. This one, again, I'm going to kind of use some heavy dots here so I can show. And you don't want to have any floating flowers, really. So if you come to a flower that just kind of landed in the middle of your water, you might want to you might have to put a new stem on it or something. Or maybe you like your flowers to float in the air. Totally up to you, I guess. It might depend on how much sipping you've done if you want your flowers to float and be, you know, psychedelic 60s flower power going on this one. And that'd be a good reference to look up, the flower power childs of the, episode of the 60s. I'm sure there's some really cool flowers that you could emulate from that. And then let's see here. So I've got a bunch of these yellow ones. I don't know if you're going to be able to really see some of these yellow ones if I incorporate them down here. They might just look like more of the yellow or the white dots. So I might just kind of lightly dot a couple of those things down there. And then I've got my purple polka dots, and then that's going to be the last representation of these flowers. So purple and white, and these are just going to be I'm going to just kind of smash my brush and give myself some additional color in here. And then we do have one final step of this painting, and that's going to be with your tiny brush. So once you get all of these wildflowers on here and you feel like you've, kind of done your duty, finished your flowers, made it as full and as lifelike as you want to, then we are going to switch brushes to the tiny brush for the final step. I'm just adding a little bit of highlight onto these peach ones because I love these ones. And I like them to be the star of my show. I don't want them to be see-through. And then, again, switch brushes to that tiny brush and get ready for the final step. All right, so the final step to this painting and the final step to any painting is to sign it. I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. This one I think I'm going to do in the bottom right. I'm going to use black paint, I'm going to use my small brush, and I'm going to do my initials. You could certainly do whatever you want to for your signature. Some people do symbols, some people do their full name, some people date it. So really whatever you want to be as your identifying mark is all you need to do. Some people even sign it on the back, so it's totally up to you. But that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.